Heavenly Tower has long been an interesting part of Battle Cat, a huge behemoth of a structure which cats of various levels can ascend up to at various points, which has two ends, both of which feature very scary little boys. It's not been a very easy thing, for sure, but it's definitely better than Growing Strange, because whereas Growing Strange is a level where there's very little room for improvement in strategy and a lot of room for unfairness, Heavenly Tower, although very difficult, allows you to be very, very specific with each level that you go to. So in that vein, instead of being like the abnormally talented Battle Cats players who can do the whole entire thing in one lineup, an average player such as myself has been spending the months and months of Heavenly Tower's existence picking away at levels, trying to make the strategies for them better and better and easier, so that the course through Heavenly Tower, every time I try it, can be a little bit smoother. And in this video, I'm going to run through the entire thing with all the progress we've made on that so far. The first few floors are very simple. What I prioritise for this one is just doing them with a slot that I already have in my slots. That one being the sort of anti-metal and generally other fast stuff slot. And that has maglev, manic line in it. It's the sort of stuff that's going to carry you a long way. At that point, what I do is I usually switch to my general slot for the 3 floors up to floor 13. Floor 14 is the metal stage, which can't really be done without your critical hitters, or it's very difficult to do without them, not really due the effort. So I go back to the second slot, all the critical hitters in, and they melt through the entire thing. After that begins the first port of call of actual strategy, and that is floor 15 to 20. Whereas Lucas, the all-impressive, has done it all in one lineup, took me a while to develop one lineup for floors 15 to 20, because I can't do it with my general slot, but equally, I don't really want to be changing my strat every single time I go from 16 to 17 to 18, and so on. Just takes a bit too long, and the levels aren't difficult enough to warrant that, because if an attempt isn't going well, then no continues, so I can just try them again. In that spirit, I worked on a strategy that would fit everything rather well, and we ended up with something vaguely resembling a sort of general slot, but more suited to the Heavenly Tower floors. So we had Cyberpunk Cat on Lucas's suggestion to just generally do a lot of damage, Manic Macho legs for peons, a Bahamut for where a Bahamut would be good, hitting things quickly, Momotaro for freezing and such like that, and Jizo because this was generally really good, isn't it? Oh, look at that, that's a bit of nostalgia, when ads for cat food actually worked. Ultimately, floor 16 was probably the most difficult for this lineup. It's not so much difficult as takes a long while, because there's nothing specifically great, because Jizos don't actually do that well against Angelic Sleepness, but you get through it eventually. Floor 19, making sure that I upgrade my work cat at the start is fine. Metal Doges go by the by really, with all the Cyborg Cats and everything else doing loads of hits and just killing them with brute force rather than critical hits. And of course, floor 20 can be beautifully carried by Shadow Gao just by itself, and Meg Aphrodite as well with all of its range. But how could I make this even easier and less effort? That is to integrate this floor 15 to 20 thing into my general slot and just change that slightly. My general slot isn't irreplaceable, it's angled mainly to be able to do the cat fruit stages quite easily, but none of them are that difficult, and I'm talking about the proper cat fruit stages here, just want to point that out. So what I've tried to do is strike a balance between Heavenly Tower applicability and cat fruit stages. So it's been difficult, especially where to put this Shadow Gao. Eventually I agreed with myself on getting rid of Camera Cat out of it, because ultimately that only serves against floating. Ramen serves as a meat shield and an anti-angel, very good for floor 16, which I mentioned there were struggles on. Jizo, massive damage, literally, against angel and black enemies. The waves from Manic Macho legs, sometimes irreplaceable, very useful. Wanted to keep Paladin in for maybe might help with floor 19, but also in case there's metal stuff in what we encounter with a general slot. Cyberpunk, pretty much good against anything, and is really long range, gonna be sometimes vital. Meg Aphrodite, the same thing, serves as a long range, massive, huge damage. A Bahamut, mostly used not in the Heavenly Tower stages of this slot, but in cat fruit stages, I use it plenty. So wanted to keep that, and then Shadow Gao, very useful with the Heavenly Tower floor 20. Floor 15 probably could be place, not that difficult a floor, but still useful throughout those 5 floors. So that's what I've settled on. Hopefully then that should still give capacity for being able to do the cat fruit stages, shouldn't be a problem. And also help with the Heavenly Tower floors 15 to 20. Then the entire first half of the Heavenly Tower, I do not need to bother creating any kind of slot for. I can move between slot 2, slot 3, slot 2 for floor 14, and then slot 3 again. Here it is then, floor 19. I'm going to try our new strategy with it. Ramen should hopefully make the start off a lot easier. The Ramens actually seem a bit too strong for their own good. They've killed the thing, which means we are going to get to the base earlier than I would have liked. But then again, this is a contingency test, right? For what could possibly happen has happened. Paladin starting off with a brilliant critical hit, getting rid of those metal doges might make our job a little bit easier. Boar approaching us very dangerously, doing a lot of damage, killing a Bahamut, and that doesn't look good at all. So that was a little bit concerning. Possibly the most annoying thing about this is the fact that we no longer have a Momotaro, and it feels like you need a Momotaro in order for this to actually work well on floor 19. So maybe I will have to sacrifice my Manic Macho legs for a Momotaro, and then that would mean at least we can stop the boar and actually make this a pleasant experience, because although what I principally want is for it to be possible, I also want it to be very probable, as it were. The fact that I can reliably get the level done without it being a bit hit and miss. But now we come on to something a little rather more difficult, and that is the no continue stages, making up the other half of the Heavenly Tower. Floor 21 is probably, as you can guess, the first floor going through Heavenly Tower originally that I properly struggled with. It's actually a really, really difficult stage when you don't know what you're looking to do. So it took a lot of refining and asking people for help and going through things like that. But now, this is the first floor that I have strategy notes on. I have a big old folder of Heavenly Tower strats with the things I need to put together to go through each level. On floor 21, we start off by freezing the Shy Boys, that's to upgrade the Worker Cat to the max possible, and then moving on forward to the boss wave with all sorts of meat shields and all of that. The Eye Cats can hopefully freeze stuff, including the Cyclone and the Cappies. Same with the Peach Devils, all for that freezing. Tropical Kalisa and Luxury Bathtub Cat doing loads of damage and meat shields in constant protection. And it usually works. Quite often Tropical Kalisa dies, but in the end it's usually alright if a little close. Mind you though, a little close isn't really quite what we're going for when we want Heavenly Tower to be an easy experience. So what I've been trying recently, and that works quite well, is putting Cyberpunk in instead of Tropical Kalisa. What that does is stays at a long range and guarantees that there's a slow on all of the units when there isn't a freeze on them, keeping them more rigidly put in place and allowing things like Bathtub Cat to still do a lot of damage to them, and so we can kill them in a more controlled way. And plus, it's less gacha. Floor 22, that one definitely is a little bit hairy and scary because it's got Brollos in it, and I don't like Brollos. But again, strategy notes, remembering to put an eraser out at the very start, for example, because there's almost an immediate Brollo, which is just horrible. But that Brollo does allow for stalling, getting up to max Worker Cat. Then a few units go to the edge and spawn the boss wave, and then when the boss wave comes back, meat shield a little bit more, and then bring on all the Ubers and stuff, that being Ultra Land, the Ultra Man, Catman, anything that's there, including like Necro Dancer, to stop the onslaught of Brollos and keep them slowed at the very least and not hitting me, because when they go out of control you lose almost instantly, and as discussed, you can't try again. One thing I've been trying to stop that from happening is using Octopus Cat. It being primarily an anti-floating, floating resistant cat, what it's actually managed to do is prevent Brollos from getting very far at all. In this run that I did here, I had far less of a sense of danger than in other runs, so I think that's one to take forward. Octopus providing a nice strong little wall against those nasty little birds. Floor 23, ultimately, is not nearly as difficult as 21 and 22. With Meg Aphrodite, it's just pretty easy. Shadow Gao works pretty easily for Pastry Cat. Any kind of strategy that I fit around those two usually works. Even my strategies, I know. Floor 24 is a really horrible one. For a long time before I had Jizo, I could just not do it. It's a really horrible stage with the tackies that you get, and it's almost impossible to deal with without Jizo. I spent a very long time very annoyed by that stage, and probably only completed it without Jizo about once after several loads of attempts. was a bit growing strangey, but ultimately after I got Jizo, I can now just use the slot that I use for XP farming, and I get through it really easily. Some might see it as unjust, I see it as justice for all the pain that went into it before. Floor 25, I think, is one of my better achievements. When I first tried the level, it was hairy, scary, and horrible. Could nearly not do it at all, but now I've got a nice strategy which starts off with the Manic to kill the Pigeon de Sable, because it's nice and tanky, it can do that. Then takes a few bites on Elizabeth the 892nd, and then that kills the Manic Island and comes towards the base. At that point, I spawn Cat Machine, and then when the gory blacks come along, meat shields and stuff, to protect the Cat Machine, and then use Bahamut to kill them. Shingen maybe as well to kill the Elizabeth, the large number. And then after that, you move forward into a Cory, which an Bahamut can usually quite easily take care of, and then if you're fast enough, things will just chomp down the base and beat it there before Assault Machine Cat and Berserk Cory can come out, and that just makes it a lot easier. Floor 26, again, is a welcome breath of fresh air. The start's very nice to stall for Max Worker Cat, and then after that, it's a relatively easy to deal with load of angel enemies. What I like to do with this level is just employ loads of knockbackers, good old dioramas, and one of my actual favourite Ubers, completely underrated and not spoken about, Springtime Kenshin, with an amazing knockback, constantly keeping the angel enemies far away so that we're nice and safe, and then freezing with Gift of Cats, Ramen for durability, and in this example I had a bit of knockback from Acrobat Cats. Ultimately quite easy when dealt with well. Floor 27 started off for me very difficultly. I managed to get through it in the video only just by a hair's breadth of Miss Hacker about to kill my base and then I killed their base. It was very exciting and very brilliant, but since then on to something a lot more simple. So now the strategy's been refined and refined down to, well, different ways of doing it, but ultimately stacky, stacky, stack, stack. So it starts off with a Maglev to get a few more monies from the Zubats than you normally would, and after they're dead you just sort of start spamming some stuff and stacking some stuff. Dragon stacks, leg stacks, all of that, and maybe Cyberpunk as well in some examples, or in other examples, Hijiri, which I hypermax for Growing Strange, and that really didn't help me anyway, but definitely does help on these levels, helping towards getting zombie kills, and even when you don't get zombie kills, ultimately once you Bahamut once Miss Hacker's under the ground, or when you Bahamut it into it and it then burrows, Bahamut should be able to hit the base and kill the enemy base before Hacker gets to yours. Floor 28 was originally, again, quite a difficult one. I mean, I just copied Cax's strategy, to be fair, and it was never something that I really failed, but it just took a while, because I always use Super Galaxy Cosmo, because Meg Aphrodite doesn't outrange a Loincloth Cat. People point out to me that there's usually metal enemies in front of the Loincloth, so it doesn't really matter. So, after realising that, I brought along Meg Aphrodite, and now it's fairly simple to do. It takes a while, but fairly simple, never really have a trouble, seeing that I have Hayabusa and Paladin to deal with the metal enemies. And I tried Chaos Moon in it as well, and that was quite nice, keeping the metal enemies in a sort of slowed formation, made it feel a lot safer. Floor 29, ultimately, I don't have a very exact strategy for, just usually Jizo and Catman and other stuff, just big area attackers and making sure I have a lot of meat shielding, including Ramen, because there's a lot of onslaught, but once you have all the area attackers, you can just keep stuff at bay, eventually kill it. Meg Aphrodite outranges Professor A, so he's no trouble, and then that's the level done. Fairly simple. Floor 30, of course, historically was quite an interesting one. When I first got to it, I didn't have Shadow Gao, and as you probably well know from back then, if you were watching, I never got it done, because I can't do it with that Shadow Gao. It's very difficult with that Shadow Gao, and I had to give up until I got Shadow Gao, then came back to it and beat it. But recently, of course, the introduction of Eva 00 has meant a new way of doing the level, or so people say. What I found was that it was very time consuming and ultimately quite dangerous. When Lorax gets a chance to kill it, everything else dies, as you may be able to see in this rather sad clip. So what I ultimately use is Shadow Gao every time. The problem with using Shadow Gao is that he will always push Lorax forward in the battlefield, which is ultimately not really what you want to be doing, because it just puts you at risk of meat shielding. You have to start using Manic Lion and working out where Cats will be before Lorax's wave ends. Makes it very difficult, but ultimately you just have to facilitate that. With combos and stuff, tack ups and all of that, we can get Shadow Gao to do a lot of damage to Lorax, kill it, and stuff moves forward. I wouldn't say I've got a strategy that works brilliantly well on it yet, but a very consistent strategy, given that we now know roughly how best to protect Shadow Gao. Floor 31 was fairly reasonable. I'd say having Shadow Gao and
Ultraman.
Ultraman and Thaumaturge and Dragon Stacking and all of that, sort of, the idea came to me naturally, and I thought, yeah, no, this works. Bit of meat shielding, bit of this, bit of that. Nicely under control, fairly easy really. Nothing much to say about it. Floor 32, everybody's always said, oh, you need a rich cat. And I'm like, I don't like using rich cats. I really don't like using rich cats in levels. So what I developed was this strange thing of all sorts of meat shields and then one more expensive meat shield. What you do at the start is just spam meat shields for your dear life to keep the crazed tanks at bay until you have enough monies for Shadow Gao, at which point you get that and keep meat shielding. That should then start to freeze the crazed tanks, and hopefully, as long as you're lucky with timings, get the Rain-D killed as well. If the Rain-D kills you, well, you're in the shtuck. After that, just keep meat shielding and meat shielding, meat shielding, get Ultraman, Cyberpunk, Mega Aphrodite, everything else, and then the crazed tanks melt before your very eyes. And there they are, gone. The end of the level succeeded in. Floor 33, I'd say, is one of my greatest achievements. Reason for that being that originally I found it incredibly difficult. It's not innately a Shadow Gao level because there's a Crazed Bird. Crazed Bird outranges Shadow Gao. Shadow Gao isn't anti-floating. Actually, not a very good match with Shadow Gao at all. So what I did was throw a huge spanner in the works, and for the longest time I was miserable on that stage, struggling, just dying over and over again, trying woofer strats, didn't work, trying any other kind of strat, didn't work, and eventually I created something, and I like this, all by myself. And this is how it goes. Level starts off and you save up to 6,000 monies waiting for Crazed Axe to get as close to the base as possible. Importance of this is getting the biggest distance you can between the Crazed Axe and the Crazed Bird. A Shadow Gao to do as much damage as possible. We've got 2 attack up combos in the first row to help with that. Shadow Gao will also kill a Crazed Legs, and at that point we've also got Octopus and stuff to protect from waves, but then after the Crazed Legs are reasonably out of sight, you can get things like Ultimate Galaxy Cosmo recently put in, which will really help with the Crazed Bird because it can freeze it. And Shadow Gao, although will probably die from the Crazed Bird now and then, you've done a lot of damage to the Crazed Axe, so soon afterwards that's dead. You've only got fairly weak Crazed Legs to deal with. Balrog from the attack combos can deal very well with the Crazed Bird, especially when frozen by Ultimate Galaxy Cosmo. The strategy, I feel, knits together really well and makes Floor 33 incredibly easy. From how truly impossible I found it before, I am so happy with how this has come out. And Floor 33 is thus my favourite floor in the tower. And now for a heavy contrast, Floor 34, my least favourite floor in the entire tower. The first time I came across it, it went rather remarkably well on account of what has gone down in small parts of history as one of the luckiest procs ever seen by anyone. Alright, that's me gone then. Fine. Fine! I mean, I haven't died yet, which surprises me, but all my resources are going towards this, so I can't even get any MOBAs and stuff back. Oh! You get yourself wrecked, mate. Did you see that? After that, though, of course, as you could probably expect, it wasn't recreatable. The Cyclone would constantly come out of procs and kill everything, and even when you started to get a stack for it, ultimately, once you knock back the Cyclone, which you'd inevitably do because you are doing damage, Aruran would be staying forward and then would kill that entire stack, and you'd never be able to regain a stack in time to freeze the Cyclone again. Woofer strats, as incredibly reliable as they are, rely on good cat cannon timings and a Bahamut to knock back the Aruran, something that's completely unrealistic for me, remembering that this is a Heavenly Tower improvement system for me. It needs to be something easily recreatable, and I realised that's just a distinct impossibility with Floor 34. It's not something you can do. So eventually I gave in and said, you know what? CPU strat. Even if I have to use a rich cat, I cannot be bothered with this stupid stage anymore. So I asked Coffee to help with it, and eventually we developed this. Loads and loads of meat shields and one Uber, and it worked remarkably well. Problem was, when I used the one Uber of Volta, the CPU would just sort of stop for it when it had gone off recharge time, would neglect the meat shields, and you'd be very close to dying. So ultimately it still required maintenance. Not that much, but the fact that it was Volta and it didn't outrange Aruran meant that the end of that level was quite long. And you can see it in a stream if you like, but it was probably 40 minutes doing the end of that level, and I could have easily given up. I gained almost nothing from the level except for an immense sense of pride for going through this rather arduous process. After that then, the solution to that Coffee suggested was Cyberpunk. Slows them and has a very long recharge time, so the maintenance isn't that great. And it seems, although I did help the CPU a little bit when it wanted to get a second Cyberpunk with meat shielding, it is a possibility that it can carry through the whole level itself. I'm yet to see that, but ultimately, floor 34, although I have to use items for it now, is resolutely doable, and that is good enough for me. I'm just so glad that I can finally do it. Floor 35 should have been an easy one. I just use a woofer strat for it. Woofer's Rampage Cat strat works really well for floor 35. Unfortunately, I've forgotten far too many times that at the start you need to create a lot of space between you and the base, otherwise the Dolphinas will just destroy you, as you can probably see there. But once done properly, and I remember to do it, which is why I have strategy notes for it, it just melts through the level. That's a woofer strat that works nicely. Equally, floor 36, exactly the same thing. Dual Islands being the solution to everything. You just power through all the enemies and get to the base and kill it, and that's it. Done. Floor 37 has never been that much trouble for me. I mean, I asked a few people for help on it. The start off is lovely because it always allows you to upgrade your workout to max and then get max monies after that. But the afterwards, for a little while, I found a bit strugglesome. People suggested different things and I came up with a CPU strat for it. In this example, actually, I was just spamming the cats myself to prove I can actually do it without CPU, but it's just nice and easier with a CPU because it's quite a long-winded battle, and ultimately you'll kill the Crazed Titan and Meg Aphrodite will long-range snipe the Nyandam. So nice and easily done. Cyberpunk's in the back, Octopus Cat's to get against the waves, all sorts of things like that goes rather well. And now, floor 38. As you probably well know, the stage which I dislike very, very much. Or did, anyway. You may recall I made an entire video on about how stupid it was with its RNG, and it was. Unless you had Poseidon, it was ridiculous. But since the introduction of Crazed Monaco, things have got a lot better for floor 38. Now you can have the absolute monster 3-part combo of Monaco, Neneko and Crazed Monaco. What that does is increase attack and critical chance, meaning that even if, as in this example, your procky boy does not proc, Paladin can proc more often because the critical chance up and do more damage, keeping the Metal Cyclone back. And with all the Volta and the Heavyweight Cat, ultimately kept the Cyclone back. I was extremely surprised that this run worked, but it did. Procky boy did not seem to manage a single proc, but I still managed to get through it anyway. So now, even though floor 38 was a horrible level, this start off of waiting up for your monies, getting rid of that Metal Doge initially, then a procky boy, and then everything else could give you to slow the Metal Cyclone, and giving yourself as much chance to proc as possible, it works. And even if that doesn't work, it shows that even with me playing, Paladin can carry it for you, and that's something that Kobe pointed out to me, and it just works beautifully now. I'm quite fond of floor 38 now that we've got all this. Floor 39, though, has always been quite a problem for me. The strat officially usually uses a rich cat. Again, I'm very stingy with rich cats. That's why I have as many as I do, because I just don't spend them. And what that has meant is that I've had to come up with possibly the most detailed of all my strategy notes, timings-wise, time exact times to do things, because without a rich cat, you need to kill the right stuff at the right time. You can't afford for any mistakes. So it starts off with a Zamboni, then exact timings after boss waves and Elder Sloth attacks is when you put out Bahamuts and things like that to get monies for loads more Manic Lions and to sustain your army and sustain Mina at the back, because if she moves forward a few inches, she's sniping your base, and that's it. One completion I did have, she ended up sniping the base for like 1 or 2 hits, but we were almost on her then. You know, if she gets there any earlier, you're pretty much screwed. But ultimately, it is a game of luck without a rich cat, but with the timings, it is more reasonable. And to be honest, I'd rather try it twice without rich cat than try it with rich cat for more assurance and then actually losing it and the rich cat. That would just seem very demoralizing to me. Still a stage I really don't like, but a stage that is completable. And finally, floor 40, the bane of everything. Lucas would argue not nearly as fun as floor 30 because it removes all the logic from it, all the sensible difficulty, and make things random and particularly difficult, much like in this example of meat shielding, where you have to spawn a Manic Mohawk exactly as its recharge time ends, which is a very difficult thing to do, and if you do it too early, you gotta and then you have to react to that and spawn it after, by which time you've left a gap between Mohawks. Ulala moves ridiculously quickly and is halfway down the battlefield just because of one missed Mohawk. And then even if you do it correctly, it sort of groups up Mohawks, and eventually it will kill 2 or even 3 at once, and it will move forward through no fault of your own. That became very annoying and difficult. It would get to your base, it would warp my Shadow Gao back and back and back, and just get to my base without any reply from my cats and destroy it eventually. What I created was a CPU strat for it, using a rich CPU and sniper, and that worked. But then I was advised on something a little bit better than that, and that's no items at all, but something that still works. And I am really happy with this strat. I can't even remember who suggested it or where it came from, but what we have is a constant line of rovers to prevent warping. Zamboni does the same thing as well, and it just keeps Shadow Gao in its place nicely. It uses slow cannon to keep Ulala there, because he moves ridiculously quickly. The movement speed's reduced to 1, which is essentially standing still. And through some strange feat or another, it keeps Ulala in place. He gets moved back really quite far and then eventually dies. It's a very reliable strat. I don't know why it works so much better than the other ones, but it's lovely. So whoever came up with that, thumbs up to you. And so that does it for the Heavenly Tower as is. I don't see why in the future they won't add another 10 floors to bring it to the big 50, which should definitely be interesting, and we can repeat this process of trying to get nice reliable strats all over again. I'm sure there's still room for improvement in the strategies I've got here, but ultimately it's made the course through Heavenly Tower a lot easier, and if you have suggestions, obviously suggest them. But principally I hope that somewhere along the line through my Uber carry and obscure things, this might have helped 1 or 2 of you through your Heavenly Tower experience, making it a little bit easier. I'm going to sign off this Heavenly Tower escapade, and that will probably do it for Heavenly Tower videos until there's more on it. But in any case, if you have enjoyed, perhaps subscribe if you'd like to. We're trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and any subscription towards that would be massively appreciated. I bid you goodbye, and I hope you enjoyed.